Good afternoon. I'm Dennis Galucki. Welcome to the 519th Imagine Buffalo program and our 141st YouTube Imagine program as well. All hosted by our very flexible and wonderful Buffalo and Erie County Public Library. Thanks for joining us. This program is created by the Center for the Study of Art, Architecture, History, and Nature, and ImagineLifelongLearning.com. Now, before we get started, just a little housekeeping. Everyone watching will be muted and your video turned off. So if you do have a question or comment, please type it into the chat box and we'll go through them at the end of the presentation. We are recording this program, so you can watch it again later on the Downtown Central Library's Facebook page and their YouTube channel. And we certainly hope you share the link with others. Now, on to our featured speaker. Buffalo native Clinton Brown is a historic preservation architect and a leader in community revitalization. He founded the Clinton Brown Company architecture firm, which works on renewing culturally and historically significant buildings and heritage places to be better for everyone. He is a frequent speaker about historic preservation and Main Street revitalization. Clinton Brown Company Architecture nominated Buffalo's Elmwood Historic District for listing in the National Register of Historic Places, inspiring his 2022 book, Olmsted's Elmwood, The Rise, Decline, and Renewal of Buffalo's Parkway Neighborhood, a model for America's cities. The New York governor appointed Clinton to oversee the rehabilitation of the former Buffalo State Asylum, designated a National Historic Landmark, and now the Richardson Olmsted campus. He is also a commissioner of the statewide Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor Commission, an affiliate of the National Park Service. Clinton, welcome. Take it away, please.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you for being here for a few minutes to talk about the past 200 years and the next 200 years. I'd like to acknowledge Dennis's leadership in imagining Buffalo as a premier cultural and nature center, a healthy, wealthy, and sustainable community. He was one of the first people in the modern era to realize those are the bones, that's the DNA of this community, and we have the opportunity to renew it based on that good inheritance. I'd like to thank the Olmsted Elmwood book team, including Ramona Pando Whitaker, Anthony Bannon, Linda Prinzi, the designer, Dennis Galucki, a Crackerjack photographer, and our publisher, Marty Gorman of City of Light Publishing. I'd like to thank the Buffalo and Erie County Public Library, particularly Melissa Burgess, who's put us all together today. And then finally, I'd like to acknowledge the first Elmwood or Niagara River region residents, the Haudenosaunee people. They lived here in a harmony with this community, and they still live here in this community in a way that as we reconcile our relationship, we can learn a lot from them if we listen. I want to talk about the conclusion of the book, Olmsted's Elmwood, in which I realized that we want to create the place in which to live well for everyone. Next slide, please. And the next slide, please. In making the case for an Elmwood Conservancy, I think it's summed up by Rainer Banham in his quote that when we know what our environment is, the context of quality is still present here, inspiring and demanding on us to rise to that occasion in renewing Elmwood and similar communities. I think Matt Lincoln, the rector at Trinity Episcopal Church in Buffalo, put it very succinctly: we are stewards of sacred places here. And what I found growing up in the Elmwood neighborhood is that I didn't know anything about it and how it came to be and took it completely for granted. As Marshall McLuhan said, basically, the fish don't know there's water because they swim in it. And yet, after 2.5 generations of no investment, we're now getting investment, which we desperately need. We need affordable housing, we need more diversity, but that investment is not helping to renew Elmwood's intrinsic character. And we can do better. And it was incumbent upon me, I thought, to try to tell people why Elmwood is significant. It's not as obvious as Chautauqua is for being significant, but it's equally significant. And I will conclude with Chautauqua as an example of what Elmwood could be if we manage it well. What we found about the fundamental values in Elmwood is that it's a balance from the very beginning, just like Buffalo in Joseph Ellicott's original plans, of the sacred and profane, nature, culture, commerce. All of these were the underpinning of the post-Civil War civil society, focusing on health and healing and well-being after the trauma of the Civil War, that caused Buffalo business leaders to attract Olmsted here to create a park for the people. Similarly, was the founding of the Chautauqua Institution with Reverend John Heil Vincent and Lewis Miller coming together. Again, one representing the sacred, the other representing the profane, to create the fundamental values of Chautauqua from the very beginning. Next slide, please. We're in a generational transition. We may even be in a millennial transition when we live today in the Niagara River region. And the essential question is, what should go here? That was really first answered in the birth of the Elmwood District, which was described in the Business Journal Commerce in 1902 as a place where nature and man seem to have worked harmoniously in the creation of what is known as Buffalo's Elmwood District. So Elmwood District is Buffalo's natal or maiden name. Next slide, please. So as we look at the notion of how to understand and care for better for Elmwood, I've drawn upon the inspiration of Professor Andrea Garcia in his work in Seville, Spain. These are diagrams documenting on the left with the dots, orange, red, blue squares, how people are using the space. In other words, starting with the people and seeing how they interact with the space to understand the space. And on the right are other diagrams regarding movement. The point is that the concept that he and I share, and we might be the only one so far, we're trying to change that, is that we're portraying the emerging art and science of understanding places worth being in. What I'm calling everyday heritage living landscapes. Now, what might that be like? Next slide, please. One of my favorite places is the Oneida Community Mansion House. It was formed by a small group of Christian perfectionists who believed that one needn't wait to go to heaven to become perfect, but could work to become perfect here on earth. And when the Erie Canal opened upstate New York to all kinds of progressive and crazy and outrageous ideas about how to live in nature in the industrial world, this group formed a utopian community that was the longest lasting in America. The Oneida Community Mansion House still houses descendants of the original Christian perfectionists who created this. Dolores Hayden wrote an extraordinary book called 7 American Utopias, the Architecture of Communitarian Socialism, 1790 to 1975. And I think it describes the Elmwood District today in noting some of what the commonalities of these pioneering places, and people were created at a time of change, millennial change, as I say, equal to ours. I think it's the same motivation that founded Chautauqua. The ideal community became a symbol of broad persuasive power. It could be presented as a garden in terms of horticulture and agricultural productivity and its placement in an idealized landscape. It could be pictured or presented as a machine. Think of the Lewis Miller's lawnmower in terms of its efficient design, industrial productivity, and its relationship to an American tradition of political inventiveness. Or it could be presented as a model home in terms of its design and lifestyle. Sectarian communities tended to emphasize pastoral themes. Think Elmwood District. Chautauqua. Non-sectarian communities, technological themes. Think of the streetcar suburb. But the most successful experiments united pastoral and technological symbolism in support of the larger goal of an ideal home. And you may know that the ability to get to the Chautauqua institution was via railroad and steamboat. So going to the next slide, please. In looking for examples that people in Western New York, my primary audience, could relate to, was the entrepreneurial grassroots effort to restore Ferry Circle in the nexus of West Ferry traveling through Black Rock to the west, and from the east, West Ferry is the street that truly is the belt of Buffalo, uniting all communities, and they restored the core by restoring Olmsted's Ferry Circle. There is the example of Buffalo Place. Elmwood resident Deborah Chernoff was a key player with downtown bankers and elected officials in creating Buffalo Place, which is Buffalo's oldest and most active bid. In the private sector, we have Larkinville. Howard Zemsky, Leslie Zemsky, and their investors and partners, and now the Zemsky family, are managing, in a sense, of a well-managed utopian mixed-use development in the ruins of a formerly prominent Buffalo business. Next, please. We have some pioneering work. Tom Beecher, Matt Estes, Pat Whalen, Tony Masiello, and others worked together to create the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus that makes people feel welcome to get medical treatment when they're at a low point of their lives. The entire operation being geared around attracting people to retain and regain their wellness. And then finally, my favorite, and one I had a little bit of involvement is Silo City. Rick Smith's industrial company, Rigidized Metals, he's the third generation operator, was concerned about what was going on around it and its opportunity to expand. He bought all the property he could buy around it to protect his company, and he was right, because if you remember next door, the paint company, the metals company, and the rest are not allowed to expand because the transition of an industrial waterfront into a people-oriented waterfront has precluded that. But Rick does wear a white hat. He is one who has earned wearing that white hat, is conducting an ecological tour of Silo City amidst those ruins of what Rainer Banham called a concrete Atlantis. So now we come, next slide, please, to how do I explain what I'm talking about to regular people with a nationally and internationally significant institution that many would be familiar with. And that, of course, is the Chautauqua Institution. Its origin was the sacred John Heil Vincent, a Methodist preacher, and Lewis Miller, a philanthropist, having created a new form of harvesting and plowing new farm implements in 1874. So Olmsted's brought to Buffalo in 1868. These two men start working in 1874. It's the same era, same zeitgeist of building a new world after the Civil War. And so here is an example of the map in 1904. And interestingly enough, it is an organic plan that is very close to what Olmsted and his son's firm was designing at the birth of the automobile era in Parkside neighborhood, Buffalo. You see there are very few straight 90-degree corners. There are routes threading through as if it were a medieval town built on the paths of goats or cows. In the lower right of that picture is an orthogonal grid where it originally started as a tent compound, maybe echoing the Haudenosaunee who lived here well and left no trace in their buildings. And on the left-hand aerial photograph, you see its two boundaries, a road that exists today that would have been a millennial trail of the First Nations people on the right, and on the left would have been their route to canoe the length of Lake Chautauqua, which they named, on their route between Hudson's Bay and the Pittsburgh area. So this is contrasted with the image in the lower right corner, which is a modern planning and zoning map. And look how rigid and organized that is. The purpose, of course, is to create a healthy environment, but by segregating uses, we may not be fully operating on all cylinders in terms of the synergy that makes a place worth living in. Chautauqua is certainly walkable. Elmwood is walkable, but other communities can be inspired by this blend of an organic place that grows out of the nature of pedestrian movement with the health and safety benefits of organizing uses. Next page, please. The point of showing these images is that what has been created at Chautauqua is a place historically worth taking a postcard picture of. When Clinton Brown Company first started out, this is back in the era of phone books, we'd go to the communities that did not have the 9X logo on the cover of their phone book, but had the image of their community on the phone book, because we knew then that there was community pride and they might be interested in hiring a firm who would help them restore that pride. So I learned to look at how a place presents itself. And you see here that as Chautauqua grew over the years, it is presenting itself to this day. The Bester Plaza postcard is available in the shop today as a place worth taking a picture of, because as you see from the photo in the lower right, it is a place worth living well in harmony with humans and nature. Next slide, please. A similar antique colorized postcard and some contemporary images of Miller Park. So the point is that the ideal next for Elmwood is to emulate Chautauqua. And the next slide, please, Melissa. And the notion is for a free, democratic, open society. I know I go to Chautauqua in the winter because they don't charge you to get in. And it's just as beautiful as it is when it's crowded with interesting people. But this is Frederick Law Olmsted's Soldier's Circle. And his notion of healing after the Civil War was to recognize the sacrifice of the regular soldier. New York State, you may know, sent 460,000 soldiers, sailors, and others to the Civil War, the northern state to send the most people. After the war, 1868, he's laying out this unusual and utopian plan, armature for the Elmwood Park and Parkways, and he puts the soldiers at the center. And this was his image of a quiet space to recognize the common people, with the two other parkways being Buffalo Generals, Chapin and Bidwell, and the Grand Parkway heading north to what he called the park is named after the great emancipator. And someone who grew up on Lincoln Parkway, when they heard me say that, said, I grew up on Lincoln Parkway. I had no idea where the name came from, but this is how we're trying to make the invisible visible so we can appreciate this landscape we've inherited, with the idea that we take better care of it going forward. Next slide, please. So as Dennis mentioned, I've been involved really for a lifetime in this place. This is the Buffalo State Asylum for the Insane. Its maiden name. Asylum now is a pejorative term in the mental health community, so we use it advisedly. But the idea at the time was that by creating a healthy, organized place, people whose minds were disarranged would help find rearrangement in work and play and location. And this model became obsolete with the medical model, but the buildings endured despite their being neglected over the years, because the State Office of Mental Health is about people more than buildings. Thanks to visionary leadership, particularly of Stan Lipsey, there's money put together to begin to return this place, even though it's different uses, to its original purpose. The restoration of its front lawn, which still remains as a Frederick Law Olmsted designed arboretum, accommodates that nature is the source of wellness that goes back to Olmsted's being a child and going on horseback riding through the woods with his father after his mother died, which Olmsted found to bring him great solace. So we are continuing to work on this project. I use it as an understanding in everybody's Elmwood neighborhood, maybe in the region, of what we could achieve with our inheritance if we put our minds to it. Next slide, please. So that's my brief summary of the opportunity to look at the Chautauqua Institution. And I want to thank John Shedd, its Vice President for Architecture, for helping me with some of these insights to fulfill what Olmsted said, and not unlike the motivation of the founders of Chautauqua. Olmsted said, I want to make myself useful in the world, to make others happy, to help advance the condition of society. So I think the Chautauqua Institution is embodying this every day, all year round, and it's something that we can aspire to in Elmwood and any of our local districts that have these bones in them, to fulfill Dennis's vision of imagining Greater Buffalo as a premier cultural and nature center, a healthy, wealthy, and sustainable community. Thank you very much for your kind attention, and appreciate the opportunity to take your questions if you have any.
Well, Clint, thank you very much for a concise and a wonderful connection of the neighborhood, the Elmwood neighborhood, and Chautauqua. And that was my hope, and you fulfilled my hope 100%. So thank you. Thank you also for the acknowledgments that you gave all the people involved. Ramona, especially, a wonderful woman, and I know her editing. She was most helpful when we worked together as volunteers with the Landmark Society at the Niagara Frontier, and she was the editor of our newsletter. You mentioned photography, and I noticed some of the photographs you used were from my friend and colleague on the Center for the Study of Art, Architecture, History, and Nature, and that's Chuck Lacuso. Chuck is the great photographer, and I simply reside on his website with C-SAAHN. So clearing up all those acknowledgments, we had Buffalo Day at Chautauqua. And in the summer of 22, Bob Shibley, who was then Dean of the School of Architecture, finished his presentation on, it was focusing on Olmsted because of the 200th anniversary that year of his birth. And he said something to this effect, Clint, and there you go. And maybe it gives context, because it was a simple statement. His view was that Olmsted thought a city like Buffalo should not see that it has a park, but should see that it is in a park, and then build your whole thought process around that reality, a city in a park. Does that ring true to you as something Olmsted might have summarized in leaving us with?
Yes, Dennis, Olmsted thought that Buffalo gave him the best canvas on which to unveil all his vision. No other city has done that. Many other cities are struggling. We have to thank particularly Joan Bozer for helping us see what we who grew up here took for granted, that our parks were our greatest resource, in my view, our greatest character defining feature, with all due respect for the Buffalo Bills, that they were threatened. And she founded the Organization of Citizens to step up and begin their renewal. And what is now called nationally the Olmsted Network, she founded also. And that's one of the, I'm trying to be an insider and an outsider, having grown up here into a community that's suddenly okay after all these years. And also as an outsider to say, this is something that is threatened unless we take good care of it. And my mission in this has been to help people understand the significance of Elmwood and not take it for granted as growing up as I did, and to dig in and raise it to the next level.
Good. All right, well, let's see what types of questions our audience has.
We have a few questions. The first one, what do you think are today's greatest threats to the character of the Elmwood district?
I think I think those of us who realize Elmwood's value have to step up. We need to attract the investment. We need to invest better. We need to provide affordable housing. We don't have any affordable housing now. We need to encourage diversity. We need to welcome people who don't look like me in ways. So I think the best thing we can do is to, like Michael Attardo in founding Forever Elmwood, that is now the Elmwood Village Association, like Joan Bozer, like Dennis Galucki in founding this series, which this is number 519, I think. This is, if we don't step up, no one else will. The existing planning, zoning, and other regimes to regulate the environment are not working. We need to bring in historic character more strongly. We can't rely only on Dan Sack to watch us, out for us. He's our Paul Revere. We need to develop an institution that matches the opportunity.
Could you speak just briefly to E.B. Green's contributions to Buffalo and Chautauqua?
I say E.B. Green gave Buffalo its face. And we don't have an architect like that today. So prolific in style, so respected by his clients and the community. I think each of us who aspire, our architects would like to have what he had. Certainly his impact is mostly downtown. Louise Bethune's impact is in Elmwood. She has quite a few buildings. She was an architect for the captains of industry for their homes. So they all go together. E.B. Green has many houses in Elmwood. We do have a review of that in the book, and there will be, in the latest version of the book, a QR code to scan to keep up with that continuing research. I just want to say one other thing. Women played a very important role in developing Elmwood. If anybody knew that before, it's never been recorded. But we have Elizabeth Miller buying farms and dividing them into lots, selling them to women. Real estate agents were deliberately selling them to women because they would say, if you buy or build this double, you can live rent-free in your flat, paid for by the tenants in the other flat. It was a time of women's liberation when the Elmwood district was being built. Their husbands were taking the streetcar to the job downtown. They were at home on their mini estate, no matter how big or small it was, operating their household as a business manager, a wife and a mother, and a social or civic activist. So we now have a different family structure. We have a different work structure. how do we retain those values in new ways? I think Chautauqua is helping lead us in that direction, and I hope that those of us who care about Elmwood will be able to find that route forward.
And we have one more question. What do you think Olmsted would think of the present condition of the Olmsted Park areas that you discussed today?
I think he'd be quite proud that his legacy, but he was not necessarily a happy guy. He would say there's more to be done. He would continue to strive to make others happy and to help advance the conditions of society. So he, as you may know, wrote the definitive views of antebellum South and the treatment of slaves. I think he would find great concern over our relationships today and the equity of having places where everybody feels welcome, which was a key factor in creating the park system. We have in Canal Side in Buffalo, I think one of those spaces that's relatively new, where everybody, no matter who you look like, how you present yourself, where you came from, feels comfortable being there. Delaware Park has always been that way. And I think he would be looking at extending that value, that reason, throughout all of the parks and parkways and throughout all of the communities around which the parks were built around the parks. That's quick off the top of my head. It's an excellent question, deserves maybe another book.
Thank you. Those were all the questions, Dennis.
Thanks, Melissa. Clint, we'll just finish it up. In many ways, the good folks, the volunteers that do these things, you mentioned Joan Bozer and others, really are the backbone of this community and carry on and appreciate the nature of the community, and through their volunteerism make so many things happen. Right now, suddenly Buffalo has risen to the top of government awareness for undoing the damage done to places like Olmsted Parks, where we put expressways right down the middle of them, and trying to reconnect them. So this series will continue to have speakers looking at what really is a powerful moment for this generation, having impact on restoring and improving the notion that we do live in a park, that all these parks, whether they're the old LaSalle Park, now Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Park, the canal sides, the park system, they really have, for the first time, the opportunity to convert brownfields into greenfields and connect them all so that we truly see ourselves living in a park. So, Clint, thank you so much for a great job. We're going to figure a way to connect you at Chautauqua here this summer. I mentioned Buffalo Day, so we'll kick it off today by announcing that the 15th annual Buffalo Day is July 23rd. That's a Tuesday. It starts really on the Monday before Buffalo Day Eve. Folks, for the last 2 years, and again next year, everybody living in Buffalo zip codes 14201 to 14280, that's 44 zip codes. They're free for the day. Clint, we don't have to go after hours after the season to get in free. We can go on Buffalo Day and enjoy the speakers and the entertainment all day long. So folks, mark that in your calendar. Get the word out. If we're not taking advantage of that, shame on us. So utilize this combination. We're the only city that they do this for, and it's come July 23rd and find out for yourself. Clint, thanks for helping reinforce the Buffalo Chautauqua idea, which really holds this whole series. And thank you, folks, again for
Clint,
joining.
I do have one more question. Sorry. Could you just clarify? I
ahead.
know it's available at the library, but where and how can someone purchase your book?
Thank you. That's most important.
The book is available anywhere books are sold. It is available through City of Light Publishing, which is the publisher. It's available through Clinton Brown Company Architecture's website. which gives me an opportunity to let people know that Clinton Brown Company Architecture has adopted the land acknowledgement developed by the Erie Canalway. If you'd like to see a state-of-the-art land acknowledgement, it's on our website or also the Erie Canalway website. But the book is available wherever books are sold.
Great. And we see Marty Gorman, and she's been a great partner here in making assisting this. So hats off to Marty, a former Imagine Greater Buffalo awardee. So thank you again, Clint. Folks, we're taking a couple weeks off for the holidays. See you on January 2nd. We'll be hearing from Feedmore. But then you mentioned Louise Bethune, and she will be the subject of January 9th's Imagine Greater Buffalo program. So stay tuned for that. Hope to see you there next year. And in the meantime, have a blessed holiday, a blessed Christmas and holiday season. I'm Dennis Galucki. Be well and good day.